Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this morning. I will introduce myself and then we will go through our PowerPoint and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. For those of you who may not know me, I am the coordinator for student organizations within the Office of Student Involvement. And I also am joined with one of my coworkers, Anthony.
Hi, my name is Anthony Malley, and I work in the Office of Student Involvement as a senior program manager and work with student organization events and a variety of other things.
Thank you. Okay, so the reason for this session is just to make sure that everyone has an understanding of what our COVID-19 event processes will be and what policies must be followed for student organizations at UMKC. Student organizations are a very important part of our UMKC community. So we want to make sure that the opportunity for engagement is still there while prioritizing the health and safety of our entire UMKC community. A few key overviews for this process is that student organization events must be registered in groups at least 1 week in advance. That 1 week deadline is really cutting it very close. So the earlier the better. These events have to go through a very extensive review process. So if you already know what you're planning on doing for the semester, go ahead and get those events added into groups. Student organizations are encouraged to host RSVPs prior to their events. We will talk a little bit about how you can manage your RSVPs on groups, but we do need to know who was participating in an event that was held on campus in case any notifications need to go out about possible contractions of the virus or things of that sort. So all face-to-face events attendees must be registered in groups using their student ID number, which can be entered into an easy card swipe box that we will show you a little later again. Keeping in mind that hand sanitizer is very important. So we want to make sure that hand sanitizer is being placed in key locations throughout the events. Some of those would be the exit, entrance, and food areas. And as always, or not as always, but outside events are encouraged for this season. They are the easiest way to make sure that everyone is social distancing and people are not in tight quarters. Okay, face masks are required for all indoor spaces around UMKC. So if you are having an event, face masks must be worn by every individual. The only time that face masks are not required is when someone is in a private office space behind a closed door or outside where social distancing can be in place. So if your organization is having a picnic outside, you still would want to encourage everyone to wear a face mask because likely people will interact in less than 6 feet. Some people we know are not able to wear face masks, maybe for a medical reason, things of that sort. Those individuals should not be permitted to attending events. We would encourage you to provide virtual participation options when possible. Okay. Student organization meetings, they can be conducted in person when proper social distancing can be in place. However, we really want to push for virtual meetings for student organizations. So if it's not feasible to have a virtual meeting, go ahead and submit that in groups, making sure that you're outlining your social distancing measures. Everyone has a Zoom account as a staff, faculty, or student at UMKC. And so those Zoom accounts allow you to host up to 300 individuals for a meeting or different types of events. So that is going to be the software that we encourage everyone to use for the virtual programs and meetings. Travel for student organizations is restricted this year, definitely until January 2021. We know that there will not be any travel for UMKC student organizations. And this is for any travel that is being funded by the university and travel that is also not funded from the university. So if you're a student organization, if there's a conference that you're looking into going to, we will not be able to make those arrangements for you, at least for this semester. Because we were not able to have involvement fairs over the summer, we are doing virtual student organization involvement fairs. There will be 4 different days that these fairs will be housed on. The categories that you see listed next to each day are the days that we're encouraging you to register your student organization for. So if you fall under a recreational organization, you would be encouraged to attend that May 31st session. Everyone will see a registration link to these fairs on their managed page for the organization. So you just need to go to Root Groups, click on your organization, and click Manage Org, and there you will see an option to register your organization. All you'll need to do is provide some information and a Zoom link to where students can come and visit with your organization during those times to kind of learn more. So fairs will be held at 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. on those days. So if your organization is registering for a day, we do ask that you have a representative for both sessions. This is restricted, of course, to only registered student organizations at UMKC. So if you have not registered your organization, please do so. Registrations are due on September 4th. Information tables are still allowed, but only in pre-existing tabling areas, such as our student union kiosk. So if you're wanting to host a tabling session, we can do that, of course, registering it in Root Groups for review. We do require that everyone has a face mask, and that if you're giving out handouts or giveaways, please make sure that those things are provided electronically where possible. If you're giving away items, maybe hand sanitizer, things like that, make sure they're single touch items where no one's reaching into a bowl to collect an item and then going about their way. Have things set out so one person touches it and nothing else is affected. And Anthony Malley will talk to us a little bit about the UMKC space availability this fall.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and kind of walk through some of our spaces on campus and what they'll be looking like. We will have some areas on campus that aren't available for use for student organizations due to certain precautions that have to be taken in certain areas on campus. So in residential life spaces, that means no spaces will be available for reservation, including outdoor spaces that typically would have been available for reservation for student organizations. As they really need to be able to control the flow in and out of their buildings. We also aren't able to have any student org reservations currently in the Sweeney Recreation Center as they currently try to reopen for normal operations and figure out exactly what that looks like. For Student Union in Atterbury, the spaces are very specific for each space. The capacities are preset, and there's kind of restricted times that you're able to utilize them. Both Student Union 401 and Pearson are being utilized as classrooms. So there's some restricted times that you can use them. And in those spaces, Sodexo will have to be utilized as the approved food service provider. And a little bit more about the Student Union. PJ was able to share a link in the chat that is really helpful and has all of this information in it if you're taking a look at it, and shows you kind of when Student Union 401 will be available in. It won't be able to be available in its large room because it's currently split into 3 for classrooms, and each space is set up for 25 or 32 participants for those classroom sessions they're hosting in there. But outside of the classroom time, student organizations can use those spaces in the way that they are currently set up. So they are set up in a classroom, and they can be used as classrooms. The theater will be available to student organizations and be limited to 80 total people. And then 302 and 402 will be limited to 15. So that's kind of what the student union is looking like for availability, timing, and spacing currently. For Atterbury, Pearson Auditorium will be set kind of in a pre-existing way for 119 folks. It's currently set in a classroom, and that'll be its default setting. Even if there are other settings that you might be interested in doing that might be available over the weekend, it still might make the most sense to stick with that classroom setting, because even in a situation where you might want to do roundtables, for example, you'd still have to maintain that 6 feet of distancing between seats. So then the roundtables become very close to almost having the tablet chairs again. So even if there's things that you might think about doing, you still need to stay 6 feet apart in all of the spaces that are available and those types of things. And then in Atterbury, the classrooms along the side, 236, 237, and 238 won't be available. For all other buildings on campus, the general capacity limitation is 25% of what their normal capacity would be. So if it had a normal capacity of, let's say, 100, it's currently 25. We'll be able to walk through that on Rue Groups, and folks from the scheduling offices that are scheduling those spaces will really look at that capacity that you're putting in your documentation. So it's really important that you utilize a realistic number there. It should be as close to what you expect as possible. You don't want to overinflate it or undercount it so that they can get you the space that best suits the needs for the type of event that you're having, whether it be a meeting or anything else. So that's going to be something that's really important, that you're making sure that you're really prepared and knowledgeable about what your proposed attendance will be. As for tracking attendance in Rue Groups, so every student organization has access in Rue Groups to track attendance at your events. You can maintain a record of that by clicking on Manage Event and then clicking on Track Attendance. So there's a very easy way to do that. We have text entry, and you can put in people's student IDs and click on Add. If you're doing that, you can also use folks' emails to track attendance that way. So you should have one person kind of set aside to be able to enter folks' student ID numbers or their UMKC email addresses, so that we can best help track who's coming to events, and knowing the numbers all are matching up, and being able to get in contact with folks if that becomes necessary. We do also have some example screening questions that we suggest that you utilize as folks are entering your events. Have you been in direct contact with any confirmed COVID-19 positive individuals in the past 14 days? Have you traveled outside of the area in the past 14 days? Have you had a fever of 100.4 degrees or higher in the last 48 hours? Are you or anyone else in your household awaiting results of a COVID-19 test in the last 14 days? So that can kind of help intentionally think through folks that are coming to your event. We suggest that it might also make sense to send these out kind of immediately prior to people who RSVP to the event, so that they don't arrive on campus if they have any COVID-19 related symptoms. And there's also kind of a lot more information on the coronavirus health and safety website on the UMKC homepage that can help provide any additional contacts regarding any kind of possible symptoms or the like, if you're individually having questions. And you can always contact Student Health and Wellness if you personally are not feeling well as a student. So making sure that you do that. But then these screening questions can also help keep everyone safe at your events. For food service operations, it has to be provided by an approved licensed caterer. We can't do anything that's self-service food currently. So things like buffets, salad bars, a giant pizza that everyone's grabbing food from, because that encourages a lot of close contact without mask wearing when you're eating food, kind of in that communal type of environment. If it is provided, it needs to be provided in prepackaged boxes or bags for each attendee, and be prepared by some sort of approved licensed caterer. So there's a variety of those. We don't have a list that UMKC recognizes, but those food service providers that exist that could do that prepackaged boxes or bags for each attendee. Okay, and now we will open it up for questions that any of you have. So feel free to ask them in the chat, unmute yourself, turn on your video, whatever you'd like to do to ask any questions that you might have.
Just so everyone knows, it looks like we did have one question earlier about if we will be sharing this material, and we are currently posting it to our YouTube page, so it'll be there for reference. And we can also send out the PowerPoint, but we did put all of this information on rubrics. So if you go to rubrics under news, you will see a nice breakdown of the student organization event policy. And we'll keep that running through rubrics and if there's any updates. So that'll be the best place for you to check.
So this is Cameron Lindsay. I'm one of the faculty advisors down at the School of Pharmacy. And I very much appreciate you all having the town halls. Going back to the food and the prepackaged and the approved caterers, I recognize that there's not an approved listing. So I guess how am I supposed to advise my students, you know, Jimmy John's, if they'll do a box lunch, if they're an approved caterer, or do we just assume that they are? How do we know? I don't want them to get that pay with the pro card and then find out that they're going to be responsible for the cost because it wasn't an approved vendor.
Yes, that's a great question. So the approvement really lies with the catering aspect of that. If you're going to order from a restaurant, we know that they already have the licensing to operate as a restaurant. So Pizza Hut, Jimmy John's, Chipotle, as long as they're providing like individual items. So of course, as Anthony mentioned, we don't want to go to Minsky's and order their biggest pizza, but if there's personal pan pizzas that are being ordered, those are fine. But when we're talking to caterers, we just need to make sure that they are fully licensed and that information is submitted in rubrics, and then the committee will review it. Anthony, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, so when it comes to the catering plan, they will, the Ruse Reimagine Event Review Committee will sometimes ask questions about what the plan is for how it's being distributed or anything along those lines. So making sure that when the students are submitting it, that they say this is how it will be distributed. It's going to be prepackaged sandwiches from Jimmy John's, and people are going to be able to pick them up one at a time or something like that, because the top concern is really having people congregate around food, because that is also the time in which people tend to take off their masks and those types of things. So making sure that that's not a time where they're kind of congregating around a buffet or things like that.
Okay. And if I can have one follow-up, it's not the food, it's kind of different, but in terms of off-campus events, I didn't see anything about that. So if students are going to have something at Loose Park, is it just kind of they're encouraged to follow the social distancing, mask, and all the city ordinances, but there's nothing to enter into groups or anything for off-campus events? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, so for off-campus events, at this time, we're not requiring them to be registered in groups, but we do want to remind our students to maintain a safe and healthy environment. So definitely following those guidelines. We don't want it to be a thing where you're going off campus and maybe serving a buffet to where students are being exposed. So keeping these same guidelines in mind for off-campus events, is kind of our expectation for our student organizations.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add into that is if they do put it in root groups, we're able to provide some suggested things to follow, and we've done that for some folks who have done stuff at Luce Park and provided some suggested guidelines for them to follow, and been able to share the city's guidances on gatherings and those types of things. Particularly, we can further restrict things that are funded by the university if the need arises too.
So we have a few questions in the chat box. The first one is, are there any restrictions on Zoom events with other universities? I'm going to attempt to answer this. If I'm missing kind of your point for the question, just feel free to jump in. But Zoom events, you can have Zoom events with other universities and invite individuals to your events through Zoom. What we do encourage you to do is make sure you have a waiting room in place and a passcode to access your event. That way you're not having crashers come in and completely disrupt your event or meeting. And then there's a question about time limits for using rooms. Right now, there's no cap for the times that you can use, for the amount of time that you can use the rooms, but you need to be mindful of the times that the rooms are available, because some of the spaces are being used as classrooms this year or other activities. And so the student union from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., those kind of things you want to make sure you take note of. There's another question. Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I was going to probably answer what you were going to answer, so you can go ahead.
Okay, so there's a question about the involvement fair, and is there an overall Zoom link to use? So for your organization's section, so you're going to think of your Zoom room as them stopping by your table. So someone in your organization would want to use their UMKC Zoom account to create a meeting room for this fair. And then OSI will have a starting point, and then we'll send those students to your Zoom room to chat with your organization. Was that the question you were going to answer, Anthony?
I'll go ahead and answer Lauren's next question about Zoom links for virtual events. So as you're submitting an online event in Root Groups, there's ways that you can do a few different things. So there's a way at the beginning that you can say that it's an online event and provide instructions in the Zoom link in that online event. And you can restrict that event to a variety of different populations. So you can say that it's only available to students, faculty, and staff. You can say that's only available to folks in your student organization that are on the roster in Root Groups, or that it's invite only. So you can set up your permissions on the Root Groups page so that it reflects exactly who you're wanting to be able to see it. And if you do invite only and you put in email addresses, you're able to do that. So that online location is what we'd suggest that you use, and then you can change the event visibility like Yannicka is showing right now. There's also on the RSVP function, you can add in additional questions. So if, for example, you wanted to ask a question about what organization they were with, or being able to share instructions about the question, you can do that on the RSVP page as well. You can also work with the RSVPs just in general, and then send out an email to everyone who RSVP'd with the link later if you didn't set it up when you first put it into Root Group. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can approach it.
Yes, and Anthony, while we're on events, we're going to go back and show you how you can track your attendance, just so you kind of have a visual for this process. So let me continue. Okay, so once your event is created and approved in Root Groups, you can, as Anthony said, invite people and have RSVPs. Oops, I don't want to show people emails. Let me go back. but you can also track attendance once individuals have RSVP. You can manually add those attendees into your event, or you can preload them before the event. So if you have a list of emails for everyone that wants to attend, you can drop that in, and then you can click if they came or if they were absent from the event. And so all of that is done right on the track the events page for your event, or track attendance page for the event, sorry.
And then it's not required that you track attendance for virtual events, but you certainly can. So that might be very helpful for you to track who's attending and sending out any follow-ups or any communication your organizations have.
And right here is the area where we mentioned the UMKC Student Work Events fall information page. We will keep this updated, and it'll always kind of be on the homepage of rubrics to refer back to. I lost the chat. Is there any other questions in the chat?
There's one on budget.
Okay.
There's a budget request question. Someone did not re-register in time and the budget request was denied. And then someone asking about virtual community service. So I'll start to answer some of the virtual community service. There are some nonprofits that are doing certain types of community service virtually. So things like writing letters or recording messages to folks. So there are some nonprofits that are doing a lot of those things. There are also some that are providing socially distanced opportunities at their locations. So if there are some specific types of things that you're looking for or that you find, feel free to let us know and we can help provide some additional resources. One that I know of is Birthday Party Project, where you're able to like record messages to children, wishing them a happy birthday and stuff like that. So there's different types of stuff that's out there.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question about budget requests. So as long as your organization has been re-registered and approved, you can move forward with submitting budget requests. They would need to be submitted under the event by event request option. And so I would encourage you to go into the SAFC information section and check with the deadlines to submit those. But yes, as long as you have been re-registered as a student organization, you can now request funds from the Student Activity Fee Committee. Yes, the enrollment fairs will be twice on the days, 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. So you did hear that correct. Those times are also posted on the Manage Your Organization page. If your organization is not able to attend maybe the recommended one for the category of the organization, you can definitely pick another day that works best. But we just kind of want to make sure we keep things even throughout the whole time for these fairs. Jessica, it looks like you wanted to know about event tracking. Yes, for on-campus events. So the question, let me read it, I'm sorry, is the attendance and registration for events needs to be tracked only for events on our campus. So we are requiring you to track events that are on campus. They must be registered and we must have some type of attendance list. Looks like that's all the questions we have in the chat right now. Did anyone have any questions they wanted to unmute themselves and ask at this time?
I'd like to ask a question about the catering, just to clarify, because I know you said that if we're ordering from like a restaurant, obviously they are listed as most of them are listed as a caterer. But what if I were to go to like Hy-Vee, like they're listed as a caterer, would I have to order from their catering side? Or because I just see that as a loophole that Hy-Vee's listed as a caterer. So like I could still go in and grab like prepackaged bags of chips and a case of water. So I just want to clarify, I would still have to go through their actual like kitchen catering side.
Okay, Anthony, you may have to back me up on this one, but when you mention water, soda, chips, as long as you're not in the student union or Atterbury Student Success Center, you're allowed to bring those items in, making sure that they're individually packaged. So you would buy a can of soda versus a liter of soda to be distributed in a cup. Chips, you would buy the small bags of chips instead of having a big bag, maybe with the chips in the bowl. So that is acceptable. When you think about providing hot or cold food in a traditional, where you may traditionally just have the buffet of food laying out, that is not acceptable in any way. Hy-Vee does have sandwiches that they will provide, like a sandwich tray. That would be a horrible idea to get a sandwich tray. But if you ordered individually wrapped sandwiches from Hy-Vee, that is perfectly fine. And Hy-Vee does have the licensing to distribute food as a caterer because they have that extension. So yeah, we understand you can go into a grocery store and buy anything. Just keep in mind that it's individually wrapped and it won't be a number of hands touching the items before they're to the person that will consume those items.
Yeah, and I'll add on briefly, what that means is prepared foods must be individually wrapped and not prepared by you. So in particular, like that means that potlucks are not a thing that you can be doing in the current situation. So you can't you can't prepare any food for use at a student organization event. But if you bought bags of chips and water, that would be fine as long as everything was individually wrapped.
And also some common things too that may get missed in the preparation is condiments. So if you're needing hot sauce, ketchup, mayo, making sure that those are in individual packages as well. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, we definitely appreciate all of you for taking the time to join us today. I personally am thankful for you continuing to operate as student organizations. We know it's a difficult time for everything, and so we will definitely work with you as we move forward. Make sure you check regroups maybe weekly throughout the semester just to make sure that you're up to date on everything. But we welcome you back to campus. Anthony and I will hang around for a little bit to answer any other questions, but everyone else is free to go. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you all for hosting this. Really appreciate it.